When I'm talking to somebody with anxiety, my job as a psychiatrist is to tease out these different factors and determine what are the more important ones. What are the factors that are a major issue for this person?
Dr. O'Sullivan, from your experience as a psychiatrist for many, many years, I'd like to now ask you about the causes of anxiety. So, to start at the beginning, why might someone develop an anxiety disorder? What makes some people more prone to the anxiety disorders?
Often there are many reasons why they're sitting in the chair and talking to me in a distressed state. Often it's family background. Anxiety runs in families, and it runs in families for two reasons. One, genetic, hereditary, that anxiety is passed down in the genes. But anxiety can also be passed on by family culture, that family dysfunction may move from generation to generation. We know, for example, that anxious parents will have anxious or may have anxious children. Tense parents may have tense children. So family history is an important factor. Temperament is another, the personality we have, the temperament we're born with. And if I'm an anxious, sensitive, worrying type of person who takes things in a highly personal way, clearly my risk for anxiety is much higher than the average person. Then the stresses of life, the trauma of childhood especially, the experiences we have in childhood. Then on top of that, we're exposed to stress in later life that triggers or reactivates all of these risk factors. So when I'm talking to somebody with anxiety, my job as a psychiatrist is to tease out these different factors and determine what are the more important ones. What are the factors that are a major issue for this person?
Can you expand a bit on the stress of everyday life? You've talked about the genetics and the childhood traumas and so on, the temperament being possibly contributors or making people prone. What about the stresses that people experience in their everyday life? Is that a big factor in them developing anxiety?
It is a factor. It is a factor, and stress will affect one person in a different way to another. And for me, it's the combination of stress and the person's temperament. But stress that is recurring, stress that doesn't go away, stress that doesn't have easy solutions. That's the type of stress that gets to a person over time. And over time, that person may develop a specific reaction. For example, with agoraphobia, where a person experiences stress in situations they can't easily get out of. So you take the housewife doing her grocery shopping on a Saturday, standing in line, people in front of her, people behind her, and she becomes uneasy and anxious. And she can't escape from that. Saturday is the only day she can do her grocery shopping, and the cart is full with the family groceries. And as she's there, feeling captive in this situation, her anxiety rises. She begins to panic. She's afraid that she may faint. In due course, she gets through the line, gets out of the grocery store. But next week, the same thing happens. She dreads going to the grocery store. And this becomes a major stress in her life. And we see that in agoraphobia. For the person with social anxiety, perhaps at work, they attend team meetings, and in that social situation, they begin to feel uneasy and tense, self-conscious. They begin to perspire, blush, and feel that everybody is looking at them. They eventually get through the team meeting, but then they dread the next team meeting and going through that experience again. So as the weeks and months go by, this situation becomes a major factor, a major stress in our life. Mm. So they're the type of things that people with anxiety will encounter. Mm.
Why do we hear that so many people are suffering from anxiety disorders these days?
Well, some people talk about the age of anxiety, that we're living in the age of anxiety. And there's no doubt that we live in a time of rapid change. We live in a time of high expectations, demanding expectations, and indeed with social media, unrealistic expectations. So that's one reason, that the time, the culture that we live in. But in addition to that, people nowadays are much more willing to talk about anxiety. You hear about anxiety and depression in the media, newspapers, TV. Public figures are much more willing to talk about the problems that they may have. So there's a freedom to talk about anxiety, and the stigma associated with anxiety has gone down enormously in the last 20 years. So people talk about it, we hear about it, and probably we were always anxious, but nowadays, compared to the past, we're much more willing to talk about it. Mm. And in addition to that, treatment is much more available. We have much better treatment, it's more accessible, it's in the community. For example, years ago, mental illness was treated in mental hospitals. Nowadays, it's treated in the community. So there is that general acceptance and willingness to talk about anxiety, depression, or problems in general. Mm.
So the speed of life that we're living in is obviously a major factor when you talk about the stressors.
Yeah. The speed of life, the rapid change, and as I said, the expectation. Mm. And then, of course, we don't have the support systems that we took for granted in the past, the extended family, religion, respect for authority, and things like that, that on the one hand we've left behind us, and maybe for good reason, yet on the other hand provided an important support and gave us a degree of certainty in our lives that we no longer have.
Thank you, Dr. O'Sullivan. You've mentioned to me that treatments are widely available for anxiety disorders, so that's what we'll talk about next.
Okay.
Thank you.